Welcome to Sectors Up Close. I'm Elena Casas. Today we're talking pharma, and my guest is Randy Watts, Senior Portfolio Manager at O'Neill Global Advisors. The pharmaceutical sector has been revolutionised in the last couple of years by one drug, semaglutide, manufactured by the Danish company Novo Nordisk as Ozempic for diabetes and Wegovy for obesity. It has made that company Europe's most valuable. Its market value is now about $441 billion. As Novo struggles to keep up with soaring demand, US pharmaceutical giants are scrambling to compete. This is the VanEck Pharmaceutical ETF, up just over 10% year to date. The biggest holding here is Novo's major US rival in the weight loss space, Eli Lilly. Well, to find out what could be next for the sector, let's ask Randy Watts of O'Neill Global Advisors. Randy, hi. To start with then, of course we've seen this huge success from Novo Nordisk, but how much competition is there? Are other companies catching up in the weight loss space?
There is competition. There's about 9 drugs in trials right now under this weight loss category. However, Lilly and Novo really are the clear leaders. You know, Lilly in particular has started a phase 3 for an oral version of the drug. That is supposed to be completed by December of 2025. If one of these pharmaceutical companies can come up with an oral as opposed to an injectable, which it is right now, then I really expect demand to soar even stronger than it is right now.
The potential demand, of course, in the US and globally is huge. Can the manufacturers keep up? Because at the moment, most of these products are essentially being rationed because they can't manufacture enough.
I think they will be able to keep up. I also think demand is going to expand greatly. There's about 37 million people in the US with diabetes. Many of these would be a possible participant for these drugs. And right now, you only have about 1%, really less than 1% of those people taking it. So I expect over time that's going to expand as we see the health benefits of these drugs. The other thing that's going to expand probably is over time, there's going to be more reimbursement. Right now, a lot of these drugs are private payer, which means the patient has to pay out of pocket. But I think over time, both the government and the insurance companies are going to start to cover this.
They are, though, very expensive, so the margins are high. But we know that the Biden administration wants to crack down using regulation on drug pricing, not just, of course, in the obesity space, but across the board. Should that worry investors?
I think that's the biggest negative for the pharmaceutical space right now. In the Inflation Reduction Act, which the Biden administration got through a few years ago, the plan was originally to start with 10 drugs under pricing controls and eventually move that to 20. But President Biden said earlier this month he'd like to see that number go to 50. So I think that could put some downward pressure on the overall industry. And the way they're going to have to offset that is really with new innovative drugs, particularly in the orphan drug category.
What could be the next big breakthrough in the pharmaceutical area? I know that you're particularly interested in Alzheimer's drugs.
Alzheimer's, I think, is a major category. There's about 6 million potential patients alone in the US, and that number is obviously growing with an aging population. There's one drug out right now, which is with Biogen and a joint venture with a Japanese pharmaceutical company. But I do think this is an area that's really ripe for innovation, and I'm hopeful that over the next 5 years, we are going to see some more innovation there. These drugs are also high priced, but obviously there's a great unmet need. I should note, people in the US expect the FDA to increase the number of drugs they're approving a year. Right now, that's about 50. They're hopeful over the next 5 years that can improve to about 70 a year. And I think within that, we're going to see a lot of innovation. There's a lot of things in the pipeline that are very exciting. And if that happens, I think it can help the pharmaceutical industry, which is growing at about 6 or 7% in revenues a year right now, expand hopefully to the high single-digit, low double-digit area.
How can investors, assuming they don't have a background in medical science, see these innovations coming? Because not many fund managers saw Ozempic coming, did they?
No, I think really the thing to focus on is once a drug gets approved. It's very hard to predict when a company enters phase 3 whether or not the data is going to be positive. In many cases, even the companies themselves don't know how the phase 3 is going to go. So I would caution investors to really wait for that phase 3 data. And if it's positive or once the drug gets approved, there's still time to invest. If you look at the weight loss drugs we started with in this program, really we're in the early innings, to use a US baseball analogy, of this entire weight loss drug movement. So while it may seem like the stocks have had big moves, if these drugs reach their penetration potential, there's still an awful lot of revenues and profits to be generated ahead. And I think the drugs will respond to them.
As you said, though, some of these stocks, Novo Nordisk in particular, are now extremely expensive. So how should an investor approach if they're just getting into the sector?
I do think the stocks have had a big move. And if we look at the chart of the overall pharmaceutical index, it's also had a big move both last year and year to date. It's likely that these stocks are going to have to either move sideways or pull back a little bit closer to their 50-day moving averages. But I think that'll be an opportunity. I think any opportunity is actually a chance to add to these names, add to these positions, as opposed to exit them. I think that for the patient investor, there are going to be some chances over the course of the rest of the year. The market's been pretty much straight up since October. We are overdue for a 5% or more correction. I think that probably will happen at some point, and that'll give investors a chance to buy the leadership companies they're really looking to do.
Randy Watts of O'Neill Global Advisors, thank you so much for that insight. And that's your roundup of the pharma sector. I'm Elena Casas, and this is Reuters.